what you anchor yourself to is, it could talk about your product, but be careful to not let it talk about the mindset that people are in when consuming your product.
Welcome to the podcast about communication in business. I'm your host, George Torok. Did you know that I'm known as the speech coach for executives because I help business leaders deliver the intended message for greater success? And we do that through one-on-one coaching or group training for the team. On this podcast, you will hear advice and insights from communication experts from around the world to help you deliver your message more effectively. My guest today is Saffana Monajed. Here's 3 facts that I think you should know about her. 1, she was one of the experts for the UK Census of Community and Media Consumption. Think about that. 2, she likes to run. She's run 2 marathons and she's training for an ultra marathon on her birthday. And that's a funny birthday present to give yourself, but all the power to you, Saffana, on that. And 3, she was a math major in university. And since then, she's done very little math except to be the marketer in the room that really loves to track the campaign numbers. Imagine that, a marketer that's actually interesting in the numbers because the numbers do count. Saffana Monajed, welcome to Your Intended Message.
It's a pleasure to be here, George. Thank you so much for having me.
Delighted to be talking with you. And today we're going to explore. Now, you are an expert when it comes to copywriting. And copywriting is not, some people think it's protection. No, copywriting is about persuasive words in writing. How do we persuade people in writing, typically to buy, but to think a certain way and get people to act? In your work as a copywriter, when you sit down to write copy for a client, what are some of the first thoughts or questions you need to get through before you can get into the right mindset?
That's a really good question. First and foremost, I ask about who. The audience is key. Really, it's everything to do with the audience. And when I ask who, I mean absolutely everything about that who. I don't just mean their age and whatever. I mean everything to do with their mindset when they are coming into contact with that piece of information or piece of copy. And that is the challenge, really. It's tailoring the words to the audience where they will receive them. So even if I was the answer to who, I'm not the same person from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., right? And no one is the same person. And no one is the same person when they're looking at text versus looking at an email versus looking at, a TikTok. So really, those are the questions I'm asking. It's like, who are they? What frame of mind are they in? And then it's what is the intended purpose behind this message? And then it's working backwards from there. Yeah, and that's one of the first things, always.
Saffana, that's a great insight there, that we are not the same person in our mindset throughout the day at different activities, even just different times of the day. And I certainly can attest that I'm much less patient at the end of the day than I am when I get up in the morning and go for my morning run.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And if I was to ask you to do anything, I'd probably ask you to do it after your morning run. That's when I would try and if I was trying to get you to do something. But if I was trying to get you to think something, I might do it at a different time. Right? But you'd have to really figure out who it is, what they're doing with their day, what's going on in their head as they're doing it with their day, and then where your message would fit in. And that's really that's the everything. That's the everything that goes into even writing the word. What it will look like, how they will receive it, and all of this is almost like an afterthought. But if you don't understand who you're writing for, and I'm a huge advocate of understanding audiences, I just think so much of it is a losing battle. Like you've lost the copywriting battle before it's even begun. So I'm a big advocate for that. Audience first.
How can we find out when people are going to be consuming this message and figure out what's their mindset going to be at this time?
It's a really, really good question. Genuinely, that's one of the better questions any client has ever asked me. So much of it is looking at how people have received your existing content. So the only way I can really answer this is like by a case that I would work on, right? So let's say one of my clients is an e-commerce client and they're selling clothes, but they're selling clothes to a really specific demographic, and that specific demographic cares about, I don't know, certain aspects or elements of a piece of clothing. What I have asked them to do is review, this is where the numbers come in, review what time of day, what time of year, and the events that are going on around that time of day or that time of year, let's say, right? Where the clothing, where they interact the most, what they are buying during that time, what is happening, what does the put in basket, take out of basket, all of that stuff. What does that actually look like for your audience? Like, look at the data and it will tell you. Because a lot of the times what people do is they project their own kind of whatever it is, like their own processes into their audiences, but you are not your audience, right? You think about the product or the service 24/7, but these people may just glance at it once every now and then. And they'll figure out where it lives in their head as they live their day, right? So seasonality comes into it when you look at your data, and time of day comes into it. Look at how people are interacting, who's following, when, what age, where they are geographically, what else they follow. And then the other piece on top of that I would always add is look at your competitors. So if you look at your competitors, you tend to have a much more objective perspective versus looking at your stuff. Because sometimes what my clients will do is they'll say, yes, but they interacted with this piece of content because, and they'll give you 10, 25 reasons. Whereas if they look at their clients, their competitors, they will see what is really happening. They will say, okay, well, they posted a swimsuit campaign in March, but it didn't perform as well as the one in May. Or let's say if they are catering to, let's say, Eastern European community in London, it's very specific to, let's say, certain geographies. And then you will say, okay, what's happening there? Should we localize it in terms of language? Should we be putting it in certain places and not in others? Are certain places are going to give them kind of like negative connotations, positive? All of that stuff. Like, you have to look at the data and what it's saying for your audience, contextualize it in terms of your audience, and then move on from there. I hope I've answered the question. But really, you need to start with the data, figure out your own, look at your competitive insights, figure out what they tell you, and then you can start to act with confidence. And they'll tell you a lot about your audience. You should always be thinking, okay, what does my audience think? What is happening in their day? What's happening in their life? Is it because the days are shorter? Is it because there's less sunlight? Is it because, you see what I mean? So you need to say, okay, there's data, but then also there's context. When you marry the two, you start to understand your audience much more holistically. And then you can start trying to understand what is going on in their head, and then you can act from there. But yeah, again, before that, I think it's a losing battle.
And I can see that marketers would have a better idea of mindset when the message is attached to a seasonal event, whether it's Mother's Day or Valentine's Day or Christmas or the first day of spring, or so we can at least get a better idea of what people's mindset be. And that's probably why I'm thinking why the Super Bowl ads are so expensive, because they know what people's mindset is when they're watching that game, mindset and probably state of mind as well. So they can design their ad messages to reach directly to their mind.
Yeah. Yeah. Everything to do with finding the time to get eyeballs. We just call them eyeballs. And it's a very marketer thing, but it's like, get the eyeballs on your thing and then you can figure it out, right? But the problem is once you've got the right eyeballs, then you have to tell them the right thing. So this is kind of what your podcast is exactly about, the right message at the right time. But unless you really understand let's use the Super Bowl as the example. I am there to be entertained. So everything in my head is, I'm there to be entertained. So for example, it would be quite jarring to see like a huge charity campaign for something that is supposed to bring me down in mood, right? That's just because it would be a jarring thing. So like my mindset at the time is entertain me. So the ads that do the best usually are they include the rah-rah, they kind of carry on that bravado, they do all of that kind of hyping you up because they're thinking you're in that mood, right? So you've got the eyeballs, then you've kind of got the passion, and then you can kind of tell them whatever it is you need to tell them. Now, the other thing is now going to be, okay, are they actually going to watch? Or is the context that they're in, as soon as the ads come on, they're not really interested in the ads, they're going to look at their phone. is that what's going to happen? Because if that is what's going to happen, then I would time my ad to that Super Bowl pause, and I would figure out the age demographic that is more likely to look at their phone and then carry on that rah-rah but on the screen. Does that make sense? Or you could take that positive association that they've had with the glimpses of your ad, and then you can put them elsewhere. But there's really good analysis actually around which Super Bowl adverts are quote unquote a waste of money and which ones use it positively. And a lot of the times it is the ones that carry on that excitement, the state of mind that you're in, and kind of continue on with that.
So timing is critical.
Absolutely. Without a shadow of a doubt. Absolutely critical. Even when we purchase things, we're more susceptible to making bigger purchases while thinking less later on at night. So like something like TikTok Shop will advertise to you the bigger products later on in the evening and the smaller products earlier on in the day. And that's just because it's an objective algorithm that it's meant to, you'll just do less discernment. The more tired you are, the more susceptible you are to just kind of going along with something. So if you're more alert, you might ask questions like, why? Is there a better option? Do I really need all of this stuff? That filter lessens throughout the day. So yeah, something like buying, timing and context. Again, the word context. So you're more susceptible to my message if I tell you it in a story. Therefore, should I fund a whole movie? Do I fund a documentary? Right? So it's the message, the context, the timing, the target audience, all of it, one and the same. You must do a huge amount of due diligence to really hit the nail on the head, I think.
One of the messages that you said is that you help companies drill down to their core truth.
Yes.
How do you do that? How do you find what the core truth is when they don't?
I ask lots of questions, George. And I always preface with that. I always will say, I'm going to ask you questions that will almost like offend you, the amount of them. Like, so just get ready. So I set the expectation, and I'm like, I will ask you questions that you may not have asked yourself. I will ask you questions that may seem so silly and so mundane that you will question my intelligence when I'm asking them. The answer to you might be blatantly obvious, but will be hidden to me. And I will just continue to ask till I get to a truth. So I actually showed how to do this really recently on my social media, where I am a big fan of certain companies, but I don't believe that they shine their truth as much as they should. One of them, if we're talking about running, and if we don't mind shouting out certain companies, there's a certain shoe company that's been making shoes, just running shoes, for more than 100 years, and that's all they've been doing. Yeah, and they've almost got like a cult following in the running community, but they don't tell people that they've just been making running shoes for more than 100 years. And I always find that really perplexing, because I'm like, that's your truth. Your truth is you started doing it for runners. I know now the cool thing is to make sneakers for people and to make, I don't know what it is, people run with like running vests or whatever. But, I don't know, they've ruined running. They've made it like a consumer sport. But it didn't start off like that. It started off with just make sure your knees are protected and your feet are doing well, because you'll need it for the journey. The rest of it is really your lungs and your head, right? So they've just been perfecting the running shoe. So no matter what you do on their website, it's actually really difficult to come to the conclusion that that's what they've been doing. And that for me is their truth. So once we get to a truth, after asking 100,000 questions, my thing is always to lead with that.
And I imagine the truth is more effective and more powerful when it's unique. Oh, yeah.
There's really good literature around that, actually. Really good. Seth Godin has written a really good book called The Purple Cow that's made this kind of infamous. But my favorite is this book called Positioning, the Power, the Battle for Your Mind. And it really is just, I call it a postcode in your head, right? Where it's like we've got infinite place in our minds, in all of our memories, and they all live there. But really branding is just association, right? And what I do with a lot of my companies is I say, where do you want your brand, where do you want your company to live? And the more unique your proposition, the more you can put a new pin there. Like you can be right in between, let's say if you're making the shoes, right in between the running mask and the running gloves. You can make a whole new little section for just really good running shoes. And that's a whole new postcode that never existed before. But the reason you can live there and you can reside in that whole postcode and you can take it up and, all of the imagery that comes with that Postcode is like zip code, FYI, for your American listeners. The more grip you have with your brand, it's the stickiness factor that you can now assign to all of your messaging. And messaging and positioning, of course, are really interlinked. But the more unique your proposition, because it is linked to your core truth that started off your company, the more you will be in tune with your target audience. Actually, it's a 2-for-1 deal. And then the more you'll be able to speak to their pain points and their struggles in their language, and the more you'll be able to reside in that postcode. Yeah, it's a beautiful science.
How critical is it to address a pain point?
I mean, my instinct answer to that is it depends on the product. Like really and truly, because some products are what they call like painkillers and some products are vitamins, like a nice to have versus a must have. And good copywriters will always say, I need you to feel like the supplement is a painkiller. So they will like itch into almost like a pretend challenge. A really good example of this is green powders. They were all the rage on like social media platforms, right? And green powders, all they do is they're essentially just an amalgamation of fiber. That's it, that you stir into a glass and you can have. But they made that green powder juice, whatever it is, look like it's a must-have to make your day run smoothly. But really and truly, that's not the case. So what they did was they made a pain point feel like they can completely solve it with this, and it's a pain point that it must be instantly solved. Whereas I prefer to work with clients who have a genuine like product that will address a need for an actual client, like an actual customer. And so let's use an example of, I worked for a SaaS company and they provided access to 1 million books online. That's what they did. And through one subscription, you have access to 1 million books online. Now, the thing that they kept on saying was this is for undergraduate students and it's affordable, quote unquote. To which I said, undergraduate students are notoriously low on money. So actually, you claiming that it's completely affordable is almost an insult to me at the time because I cannot afford it. So even if you have 1 million books behind this barrier, I'm going to look for 100,000 ways to avoid this barrier to get those books if I'm a student. So really and truly, you are not solving this. Actually, you are speaking down to your intended target audience. So if you were to change that messaging, which we had to do because it did not do well. And they were like, why isn't it doing well? We're saying it's affordable, 1 million. And I was like, the target audience isn't hearing that. The target audience is saying, how can you not afford this? This is where your books are. You are not doing well if you cannot afford this small payment, quote unquote. So anyways, after lots of digging and deliberation, they realized that actually the entire platform needed to be spearheaded by master students. So people who were postgraduates, who had done a little bit of education, were going in for much more niche books, right? So there's less of them. But then once they were on board, they then had the ability to use social proof to backtrack and then take away all affordable messaging and then say, this is for people who are trying to get very good at their craft. This is for learners who want to go the extra mile. And then, of course, the nice to have seemed like a must have, but it would help them with their studies in the long run. But it's just the way that you would position it to them was a delicate balance.
Now, that is fascinating. So they initially targeted undergrads, but undergrads didn't buy the message. So then they retargeted graduate students who would be more willing to invest and then use those testimonials, those stories to show the undergrads, hey, here's what the grads are doing. They were just like you.
Correct. Yeah. And universities as well. Because they would say, of course, your undergrads need this. They may not be able to afford it. So now instead of selling you one license, we can sell you for your entire undergrad and it will actually save you money. So it was just, how do you get to the next stage by really drilling into your truth? Like, is your truth that you are affordable? Or is it this that actually for this specific demographic, that is not a true statement? So you must find another statement, if you know it will help them, that doesn't demean them, that doesn't beat them while they're down, right? So it's just very delicate. And it seemed like it was harmless. It seemed like actually, it's an affordable da-da-da-da-da. But it's harmless to who? So yeah, messaging and understanding your audience is critical. Like, honestly, it's the difference between make or break sometimes.
What does a company need to do to identify that core truth? Now, you were able to look at this SaaS company and point out where they are missing it. The danger is they create what they think is the avatar, but that's what they want it to be, not necessarily what it is.
Correct.
So how can they get out of their own mindset and into the mindset of their target audience?
Such a good question. That is such a good question. And the reason it's tricky is because it's so close to ego when you are that close to the product. Like, that's the core truth of what I'm saying here, right? So a lot of the battles that I have, not battles, but the back and forth that I have with my clients is, you must allow me to be subjective. Like, you must allow me to be subjective. It's difficult to take your subjectivity because you're projecting yourself. So allow me to do the subjectivity, but first we must do the objective, right? So you have to go to where your audience is without casting your own projections onto the audience. So this is where a really practical, so again, it's actually with the SaaS company. So let's use that example again. I created a tiny, small focus group called the super users. And all I did was I just went to the data. This is again where marketing and data, it's impossible to do one without the other. I believe, like, one will lead you, data will lead you to your target audience without, whether you like it or not. It's what it's going to do. And if you want to get to your target audience, you must get to the data. So what I did was I tried to find the people who, again, it's that thing that we said in the beginning before we started, couldn't help but use the product. Who are those people? Who are the people who cannot help but keep buying your thing? What is it about them? And the easiest way to get to the answer is to ask them. You can incentivize them with the product for free. A lot of the time they won't take it because they'll be like, but it's money that I want to give. So you have to kind of incentivize them with something else. You can be a brand advocate. You can do all of this other stuff, right? So this was the logistics that we had to work out. Because actually when I offered them the free product, they were like, I paid double for this. There's a pointless proposition. Yeah. And that's how you know you've landed in your target audience, in your perfect pool, where they go, I don't want that. I've set aside the budget for that, or I've figured it out with my whatever, right? Anyhow, so once you found those people, you then start asking them questions. What is it that you were doing before you found this? That's one of the key questions. What is the thing that you had to plug that gap before you had this? And what would you do if this thing were no longer here? That's the real, because then you find that postcode. You find the exact neighboring, does that make sense? You find your neighbors in the postcode because you go, that's my competition, quote unquote. And then you go, I must live exactly there. And they've done your messaging for you. So they had done the messaging for me when answering that. When I was an undergrad, I couldn't 100% afford this. An undergrad, straight up to, I also found anti-users, by the way. And the anti-users were people who did not want to pay at all. But they looked like they would be the perfect target audience. That was the thing. They looked like perfect target audience. And I found an undergrad who was doing a subject that we had every single book for. And I asked them, would you take the service for free? And they were like, yeah, but I'd read books that wasn't like nothing to do with my course. Okay, how much would you pay for the service? I would never ever pay for this service. There's nothing you could do there. And those are perfect because I have to understand everything about that person and say, I'm doing everything to stay away from that person. Right? So you have to get into the target audience. You have to figure out your data. What does good look like? That was another metric that this SaaS company didn't know. Is it 3 times a week they use your service? Is it 4 times a week? Is it non-stop? Is it constantly scrolling? What is it? What does good look like? Find that good. Talk to those people. What are you doing with the thing? What would you do if it wasn't here? What were you doing before? Now, how do you use it? Then that's your messaging. Fabulous. That's the people who are really using it. I need to find many more of them. Many more of them, and I've got a popular product. The people who look like they should be using my product but are not, I have to ask them what I'm missing. And then you figure out what the antithesis to this is. And then you've got a really good understanding of your product and what to build on top of that based on your audience. And none of that, by the way, was enjoyed by the people who founded the thing because it did not tell them what they needed, they wanted. But I was like, it's what the numbers are saying and it's what the people are saying. So do with that what you will. But yeah.
So, Saffana, I want to clarify if I heard you right on something. You said that we need to understand the mindset of people who would never buy.
Correct.
so that we avoid putting any energy attracting that sort of person.
Correct.
And it's interesting. I've seen something. I've seen a similar message where people say, "Be careful of giving something away for free, because you're just going to attract people who want something for free who may never buy. It might be better to give it away for $1, or because at least they are willing to pay. And the question is, how much would they pay at some point?"
Correct. Yeah, I'm a huge believer in that. And also the data says that. And also, if you think about yourself as a consumer, that is just true. Because there is, if just humanize yourself for a second and then say all of the things that I use for free. There are many things that I use for free. Okay. Most of them I haven't looked at twice. There are some things that I pay money for, right? And whether that was $1 or $25, if that bill comes through and I haven't used it, I'm going to go back to it. I'm just going to go back in. I'm going to see I'm going to just see. Because what we're doing there is a really nice concept. You can find it in a book called Influence by Robert Cialdini. It's really good. And it's to do with confirming who we said we are. Right? So we want to double down on who we said we are. It's almost like an identity thing. I think it's called confirmation bias. And we want to stick true to our word. Right? So if you paid the £100 for the weight loss thing in the beginning of the year, just almost out of spite, you're just going to go back and use it because you're going to be like, oh, but I said I would, right? I put my money there. But again, it's that thing of what does it mean to part with money, and what is the mindset of someone who's willing to part with the money to do a thing? It's not a fail safe, but it definitely will put you on the right tracks a lot of the time. So yeah, I would, unless you have a fantastic free offering that you don't mind giving away for free because you've got another way of making that income.
And listening to you talk about the confirmation bias, I'm thinking about, I've got a few subscriptions that I don't get much use out of, but I just keep letting it go because I think, it looked good in the beginning, but yeah. I'm not using it, wasting that money.
Yeah. But you don't think about it like that at the time. You go, but that's who I am. So I knew a guy, and this was actually something that weirdly we're going to keep coming up to that SaaS company. I knew a guy who paid for the gym for 6.5 years and didn't go once.
Whoa.
Yeah. And it wasn't a cheap gym. It wasn't a cheap gym. He just wanted to be associated with that gym so badly. That's all it was. That's all it was. And he worked near there. And only lockdown made him have to take it off. That was literally it. But I remember this conversation so clearly. It was in the same company with the books, where the companies have this thing where they want to kind of anchor their product to other products. So they called it a kind of like the streaming site for books, right? Or Netflix of books or whatever it was. To which I said, I don't think people are consuming you the way that people are consuming movies. If anything, this is the gym. Because you've got a card that speaks. So if your gym spoke to your physical abilities, this speaks to your mental abilities. No one has Netflix or Spotify to prove their ability as a linguist or as a whatever major you're in, like a mathematician. But people do it with the gym to prove that they are associated with something, right? So the mindset that they were in, I was like, you're not in a mindset of consumption. You're actually in a mindset of almost status, trying to acquire status. And that's a very different set of words. Make sense? So again, it's that, what's the postcode, but really what the mindset dictates where it is. What am I trying to attain? What's the thing I'm trying to, the plug? What is that? So yeah, it's what you anchor yourself to is, it could talk about your product, but be careful to not let it talk about the mindset that people are in when consuming your product.
Don't talk about the mindset that people are in?
So what I mean by that is when people say our product, let's say they call it let's use the same thing, the Netflix for books. That makes it sound like people are consuming books like, do you know what I mean? Is that how people consume it? Like, you have to really think about that, because that then misleads your entire marketing team. Because then it starts speaking to a mindset of consumption where we go, I want to be entertained. Do we want to be entertained? Rah, rah, right? The Super Bowl. Do I want to be entertained? Do I want to give? There's loads of different things. There's loads of different like charity gigs and all of this stuff where if you put that messaging there, people are susceptible to want to give because they're in a giving mood. But if you were to give the same perfect giving advert to support a charity, to support children in need, whatever it is, but put it in the Super Bowl, because of the mindset that people are in, right? Of course you have eyeballs, but the mindset, you can't mistake the two. They're two very contrasting things. So this is particular when you have a team. So clients that have specifically global marketing teams, if you do not get that mindset perfect, right? And sometimes it's as simple as people going, it's the Netflix book, is it? Because if someone takes that marketing thing and then starts talking about books like they're entertainment, when actually they're non-fiction learning books for university students, you're just going to miss the point completely. So yeah, you talk about mindset, but you have to be very specific with your language. And you have to say what is specific to external, to understanding how to anchor the product, and to internal, where we market the product. You have to be like, it must be razor precise, especially when you're scaling words.
And I'm thinking about that. Yeah, I'm running that phrase, Netflix for books. And you're right. When I think of Netflix, I'm thinking about, sitting down and watching a few series of in one binge night, just for pure pleasure, pure enjoyment, probably having a drink at the same time. And that's not how I would consume books. Especially
not nonfiction books. Yeah. Especially not those that are supposed to get you the grade that are supposed to take you to the next year of your university studies. So again, it's detrimental to your messaging later on if you get that wrong. And it's a tiny seed. It's Netflix for books. The 3 words, right? But it will ruin your marketing campaign later on if it gets in the wrong hands, because it's a very different mindset. It's a complete mindset shift. So you have to be crystal clear.
Saffana, if people like to know more about you, your services, where's the best place to find you?
So I teach all of this stuff completely for free on the internet, which is, if you like hearing about this stuff and getting really precise with your audience and exactly how I've done it, you can find me on TikTok or you can find me on Instagram. And I'm the only Saffana Monajed in the world. That's one of my USPs. I'm the only Saffana Monajed in the world. So if you can spell my name, you can find everything to do with me. I highly recommend following on TikTok and Instagram.
And you can find those links in the description below. Saffana, as we prepare to wrap up, if you could sit down with let's talk to the marketing team. You could sit down with the marketing team and they're looking at the year ahead. They're putting together their plans for promotion. If you could give them 1, 2, or 3 pieces of advice of how to get their mindsets right, what might that be?
It's a really good question. One is the mindset of the marketing team themselves.
Of the marketing team themselves, The
first thing I would do for every marketing team, especially to do with mindset, is to follow what the actual A/B test says. Spoken like a true mathematician marketer. That's the first thing. If you can do that, so many doors will open up. The second thing is to not project your own ideas into your audience analysis as best as possible. And the best way to do that is to get someone who isn't making the words to read the words. That's a really good thing to do. And the third one is a difficult one, but it's not just for marketers, but it's to take ego out of your writing. So what I mean by that is you will write copy as a marketer, you will write messaging, you might write campaign ideas if you don't work with the agency or an agency that does it or a freelancer. But when people critique your words, they are not critiquing you. So tear those 2 things apart and you will become a much better writer.
Powerful advice there. I recommend that people go back and replay that again and listen again and take notes. My guest today is Saffana Monajed, reminding you that you need to go to where your audience is and not project you onto them. If you like what you heard, tell your friends and post your 5-star review on Apple Podcasts because that helps more listeners find us. Come back every week for more practical insights to help you deliver your intended message. I'm your host, George Torok.